Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to begin my segments of tactical talks on the Necron Codex. So, why have I chosen Necrons as the next faction for my tactical talks? There's a couple of reasons for this. First one is that Necrons have gone from originally in 7th to 8th edition from one of the most competitive / annoying forces to face to one of the ones that a lot of people are now considering one of the worst, which is a bit interesting. The other reason as well is that, interestingly, I've had the most success on the channel playing Necrons. So either, I don't know, something's going on weird there, but for some reason I do okay when I play Necrons. Yeah, a lot of people are saying they're not so good, so what's going on there? No idea. So I thought that gave me a good reason to share my thoughts on them. And lastly, I enjoy playing Necrons, almost the immobile undying legions. I find it quite enjoyable. Plus I've covered now a Chaos force and I've covered an Imperial force. I think it'd be time to cover at least one Xenos force. So Necrons have gone through a fair amount of change when it comes to 7th to 8th edition with various, chapter approved. It's interesting to see where how they've evolved to where they currently are. From their the once brutality of the Chikurian formation back in 7th, where they were nigh unkillable, and a very tricky, nigh unkillable to actually bring them down. They're now in a tricky situation for the game as a whole. As far as I remember from 7th, they were, kind of like, you took them, and if you took Chikurian, they just wouldn't die. So it's an interesting way that we have evolved from that sort of almost undying to there is ways that can happen, but their counters are now a lot easier to pull off. In this video I'm going to look at some of the overall army rules. So this is the first part of 2 where we look at the sort of overall army bits and bobs. In this one I'm going to look at reanimation protocols, living metal, powers of Catan, and that's sort of the psychic abilities, but they're different for Necrons. And finally dynastic codes. In the next video will be more geared towards stratagems, warlord traits and relics, so that'll be part 2. So yeah, with that we'll begin by looking at the overall army rules, starting with reanimation protocol. So reanimation protocol has changed heavily since 7th edition, somewhat improved to an extent. However, it does have one big giant counter to it and a couple of hindrances as well. I talked when I did Chaos Space Marines, like Death to the False Emperor can be a difficult ability, never takes into effects with Xenos or other heretics, and only when you're in combat with Imperium units, and the modifiers can play a big part of that as well. And generally, and it was only in the fight phase, so it's something that in the heat of battle you can probably forget about. Reanimation protocols, however, is a lot more simple, and it becomes a staple in your army rotation. Basically at the beginning of the turn, you're going to go, right, reanimation protocol time. Where other army abilities you may forget because there has to be things that do affect it. This basically is you're going to play it, so that's quite good there. So yeah, it's very different to, as I said, Death False Emperor, Loci for Demons, etc. So yeah, a few ways to augment this with units, stratagems, war gear, depending on what you want to do, which I'll speak about them later, basically to make it a lot more easier to pull off. However, the main thing when it comes to reanimation protocol is I'd say it does have a few key weaknesses. One, if a model flees rather than is slain, it cannot be reanimated, and this creates a lot of bookkeeping. Like it can be a real major pain keeping separate piles from your dead to your fled units, because your dead units can reanimate, your fled can't, and this can be a real pain in the ass, but absolutely vital. And as turns go on, if you do have units that flee, which is not regular for Necrons, they are leadership 10, it can just really be quite a pain. If you play big blobs and you're not, keeping track of them, it can be very, very painful. When you do set them up, you must also set them up in coherency with a model that did not reanimate, and you must be more than an inch away from your opponent. This creates a big weakness against combat heavy forces, particularly hordes such as orcs and tyrannids, who can swamp your units and deny you any room to reanimate, and thus then you can reanimate, which is a real problem there. And finally, and probably the biggest weakness, is that if you simply wipe the unit, you know, one at a time. You know, you delete that unit, your opponent does that. You can't reanimate, you know, so you don't need to worry about that. Those destroyer units reanimating, they're dead, they're not coming back. And I feel that is a real problem for reanimation protocols. The other one is 20 warriors, you know, 20 warrior blob, but only 3 of them remain. Most likely will be destroyed by morale, in which case you can't reanimate because they're all destroyed. Or you're going to spend 2 command points to keep them around and then be able to reanimate, except for the ones that maybe have fled, which if you spent 2 command points they shouldn't. So when you play big blob units, it can be quite demanding on you on 2 command points, or morale will wipe them and then you can't reanimate at all. And that can be a real problem. The main part being obviously the systematic destroying of units is the best way to stop reanimation protocol, and is real pain. However, a big advantage of reanimation protocol is that it does happen every turn, which in 7th I think it basically gave you a 4-up feel no pain that can happen no matter what, which 4-up feel no pain happens no matter what is really good back in 7th. This, you know, even if, you know, every turn that goes on you can keep trying to reanimate your model. If it fails one, it doesn't mean it goes and dies, it means you can reanimate it later on. And that can be really good in like wars of attrition. You can just keep systematically bringing them back. If it was not possible for the biggest weakness of the unit's utter destruction, so if you destroy a unit entirely, that being a big killer, I wish there was a stratagem that can maybe counter that. This could possibly be the strongest army-wide ability if there was ways for them to come back from the dead or to reanimate from the dead. But, you know, I mean, utter unit destruction. So what I'm trying to say in that one, that can be a real pain. What I want to do is have a look at reanimation protocol, as it does quite useful, you know, 5-ups, reanimate them, bring them back, is the ways you can augment it to make it a lot more reliable when it can be used. Technomancer and Master Technomancer, this is what you see in your cryptics, essentially adds 1 to reanimation rolls for units within 3 inches. Really super good if you're building force that you know will be using a lot of reanimation protocols. They're from cryptics and a few characters. If you're using large units of warriors or mortars, that's really good. Or even on destroyers, a single destroyer coming back with full wounds is really nice. And if you're bringing them back in 4s, you can bring back nearly half the unit if they're not all wiped. And I feel with a cryptic, you know, sitting in the back with destroyers, it's a very dangerous combination. Heck, take 2 units, big destroyer units, and you've got a very dangerous unit. We have Resurrection Orb, once per battle, essentially making a second reanimation roll for a turn for a unit within 3 inches of the model. Not bad, but you know, not great. When used with the Technomancer, it can bring back hundreds of points, you know, essentially, well, depending on how many you're going, but essentially if you had, like, for instance, 1 warrior left that was still going, and then you reanimate half the squad because you've got the Technomancer, and then you reanimate again at the squad. I've done it once and I think I brought back 16 warriors. It was really good in 1 turn. Situational, but not as reliable as the Technomancer, and really works well when it has been augmented by Technomancer. Enhanced Reanimation Protocol, 2 command points, can choose a unit in your army, but before you make Reanimation Protocol rolls, they can reroll 1s. Maybe a bit steep for 2 command points, and 1 possibly would make it too cheap, so it's a bit tricky on that one. Interesting as it lasts the turn, so if you do use Resurrection Orb, this second round of reanimation, this second round of reanimations you get from Resurrection Orb should allow you to reroll 1s as well. So that can be quite good. Maybe all these abilities stacking can nearly bring back a whole squad, which is quite good, but you're putting in a lot of command points and stuff as well. Repair subroutines, 2 command points, Canopta units can get reanimation protocols. Again, possibly a bit heavy for 2 command points, maybe, but this has once or twice brought me back to, even once, 4 wraiths, which wraiths are a huge pain, so bringing them back is fantastic. You know, I think it was against Terminator unit, I was down to 1, and they were Thunderhammer Storm Shields, were just grinding each other out, and then I brought back 4 wraiths and wiped the unit. It was amazing, and I was doing on 5s as well, didn't have a cryptic nearby. So it can be good, but 2 command points in Necrons is a bit of a tricky one. I'll go into that maybe a bit later. about sort of stratagems and why it can, I think that'll be in part 2, why you've got to be very conservative with them. We've also got Orb of Eternity, which is a relic, basically a resurrection orb, but when you make your roll, add 1. Meh, there's much better relics than that one out there, to be honest. I'm not a big fan of that one. Lastly, although this does not affect reanimation protocols directly, I still find this possibly the best and most useful ability when it comes to reanimation protocols, and it has saved me countless times. Immortal Pride. This means your warlord can deny the witch spell once, but more importantly, dynasty units within 6 inches pass morale automatically. This stops your opponent from trying to cause enough damage to cause your units to flee or spend command points to wipe you out. No, they have to eliminate you to the man, otherwise you are going to reanimate, and you're going to reanimate well because you haven't had any of them flee. If you're playing big, heavy infantry, heavy units, for instance, you're playing 2 20-man blobs of Necron warriors, and they don't get wiped, this is all but essential that you ensure that the units don't get wiped, and then you reanimate well. I just feel that that is a warlord trait that in personal use has been so good if you are bringing large amounts of like Necron warriors. It's really good. So to finish on reanimation protocols, frankly, I cannot stress that a clever opponent will know, and you don't need to be that clever an opponent, will know how to counter this. So trying to make the most out of it can be very tricky. However, if your opponent does mess up and don't wipe you out to a man, bringing so many, models back can be devastating to your opponent and really swing a game. However, I feel this is a rule in the game that if it did change or if it did get tweaked, it could possibly be game changing. I hated in 7th where some units were almost impossible to kill, utterly indestructible. They took so much firepower to move because of reanimation protocol. This now makes it not so much of a problem. So there's a very fine line when it comes to this rule, how it changes, how it evolves. A lot of people are saying now it's a little bit too weak, but I think it's got such a tipping line of becoming way too strong. We are where we are with it at the moment. I quite like it. I just wish there was a stratagem or something that could, tip this being utterly wiped, make the unit essentially be able to reanimate or something, maybe deep strike, so that when they are wiped they can come back. Maybe a bit more similar to, I think, is it AdMech and a few other units, maybe Orcs as well, is that you can, if there's a unit that's like 1 model left, you can take them away and then redeploy them within 6 inches of a board edge. Something like that, but with like reanimation from a Tomb World or from underneath Tomb World. Take one of your destroyed units and bring them back for 3 command points. I'm not sure. But I just feel there needs to be something that makes it so that it makes it a bit more useful for when units are utterly destroyed. And I feel that weakness is quite bad. Next up we have Living Metal. So a simple rule but very easy to forget, though again it can fit into your rotation. You remember the start turn, right? All my models with Living Metal go up. Goodness knows I've forgotten a couple of times and it can be a bit of a pain. Basically a model with this rule recovers a wound at the beginning of your turn. So anything that has that, you're looking at vehicles, some characters go up a wound, fantastic. Simple and easily, found with characters, HQs, vehicles, and teamed up with quantum shielding can be pretty darn good. Necron vehicles can be an absolute pain to destroy. They can ignore high damage pretty easily, add on regenerating wounds. Really quite nice, really quite good. Lastly, their number is Legion, which is essentially your troops get priority if they are on an objective, unless there's another troop choice there or someone with a similar rule. Won't go into in detail, but it does add a little bit of importance to troops. Troops obviously are a good way to also get command points as well, though a bit tricky in the Necron Codex. Yeah, really handy to have, gives a bit more importance to troops. People were happy to see it. Century upset, objective secured. Yeah, really good. Not going to go into in detail. So let's go into Catan powers. So possibly one of the most interesting part of the Necron Codex is Catan powers and how they work now. In the past, they were really unreliable and not something that you could, count on because, well, they were just a bit too random. Not so much anymore. Well, you can roll randomly for the powers, which I highly don't recommend. If you want to be that adventurous, go ahead, but don't recommend. Important thing to remember is that you can't pick. So if you do pick the power, you can't pick the same power twice. You know, you have to have all the powers chosen once, and then you can pick them twice if you've got multiple Catans. And then same with third way through, is that you've got to have all the powers picked twice, and then you can go through another lot of them. So yeah, not easy to spam this, you know, spam the same power over and over again if you've got multiple Catans. The other thing I like about Catan powers is that you can engineer them to achieve goals, or at least complement each other, so that the Catan powers work throughout the turn. I'll go over Catan powers individually and say what their strengths and weaknesses are, and more importantly, what situations do I like with them, because I've had great results when it came to Catan powers. So Antimatter Meteor. Roll a d6. On a 2+, the closest viable enemy unit within 24 inches of Catan suffers d3 mortal wounds. On a 6, it suffers d6 mortal wounds instead. If the Catan charge is using this power as a Tesseract Vault, the unit suffers d6 mortal wounds on a 5+. So this is kind of your safe bet ability, useful in just about everyone, reliable to pull off with a chance for it to be even more dangerous. The downside is you do not get to choose the unit effects, it is the one that's closest visible, which is a bit of a pain. However, it is a safe bet that complements, you know, just about any other ability out there. So if you're not, if you've got one power that you're like, I'm going to use that, that's going to work really well against my opponent, this is a good safe bet to use as another one if you can't work out if any of the others are going to do really well. Times Arrow. Pick a visible enemy unit within 18 inches of the Catan shard and roll a d6, adding 1 to the result if the Catan shard using this power is a Tesseract Vault. If the result exceeds the highest wounds characteristic in the unit, one model from that unit chosen by the controlling player is slain. An unmodified roll of 1 will always fail. A bit of an odd one, useful against single wound horde, useless against single wound horde forces, simply better choices everywhere else. If you're playing hordes and they're one-unit models, better everywhere else. However, against things multi-wounds, even 2 or 3, this can be a reliable way to take them out. You know, Custodies, for instance, this would be great. You know, you just got to get 4+, 1 dead. However, I feel even this capacity, Antimatter Meteor can do a better job, for although Times Arrow, if it rolls, it slays. If Antimatter Meteor does fail, as it only causes, like, you know, if it does fail, what I mean by that is if you get a 2+, then you only cause, you know, d3 mortal wounds. At least you cause a mortal wound, you're very reliable to do it. And then there's the chance for 6 for d6 mortal wounds, so you get big rewards. However, this can, you know, this is very much big plays, big wins, you know. You can target character with this ability, especially support ones. A single good roll will instantly kill them. No failed fails, no failed wounds, it's just slayed, so you can't do, you know, ignore wounds because it's slain. So even if they have like 5 up, you know, ignore one wound effect, it doesn't work, you're slain, you're dead, because there was no, you know, failed saves at all. Unreliable, but ultimately if you want to do a big play and try and snipe out units, kill them, dead. So yeah, only if you want to play big. Sky of Falling Stars. Pick up to 3 different enemy units that are within 18 inches of the Catan shard. Roll a d6 for each one, subtracting 1 from the result if the Catan shard using this is a Tesseract Vault. If the result is less than the number of models in the unit suffers d3 mortal wounds. An unmodified roll of 6 will always fail. So yeah, so if you ask me, this is going to be your go-to power for units of 5 or more above your opponent's, you know, or your opponent's favour. So if your opponent's playing, you know, 5 and above, fair enough, that's kind of, this is going to be a good ability. Having 3 chances to roll less than your opponent's squad size, which if it's 5 is about 66% chance, is pretty good, you know. Against an opponent that favours elite units or vehicles, this is going to be entirely useless. So against Custodies, it's going to be quite difficult because you might be 3-man squads, and against vehicles and characters, it's not going to really happen. You know, it's going to be really, really difficult. So yeah. Yeah, sorry, yeah, number of models in the, it's got to be less than the number of models on it, so yeah, kind of difficult on that one. So yeah, if you're playing 5-man squads, I think this is going to be really, really good. Pick 3 of them, do damage. So I know that's a big favour for things like Space Marines that might split apart, Chaos Space Marines, but against Hordes, not so much. There's better ones for that's coming. Seismic Assault, no, it's going to be Cosmic Fire, that's one of my favourite ones. Roll a d6 for each enemy unit within 9 inches of the Catan Shard. Add 1 to the roll of the Catan Shard using the powers of Tesseract Vault. On a 4+, the unit being rolled for suffers d3 mortal wounds. So yeah, as I said, this is one of my favourite powers. Pretty darn reliable, in a good position. We'll see multiple units hopefully suffer d3 mortal wounds. If your opponent favours multiple small units, characters, vehicles, etc., you can capitalise this very well. However, as much as this power can do damage, it has a major disadvantage of being incredibly short range. So you'll pick one of the medium or long range Catan powers to use till you get in range with this one. So usually I maybe even go with Skyfalling Stars, Seismic Assault, or Antimatter Meteor, but I love playing with this ability as well, because Catans tend to hit pretty powerfully in combat, so there's no reason you might want to move your Catan into a very aggressive combat range. And then Cosmic Fire. One problem is I tend to fail the 4+ a lot when using it, but I feel if it goes well, it can be devastating. If your opponent's playing multiple characters, I think I caused like 5 wounds between Librarians and Lysander once, and it really did cripple them quite significantly. So I really rate Cosmic Fire if you know your opponent's playing small units, and you can just basically charge in there, and one good Cosmic Fire can really make a difference. Seismic Assault. Pick a visible enemy unit within 24 inches of the Catan Shard and roll a d6 for each model in the unit. Add 1 to the roll of the Catan Shard using this power as a Tesseract Vault. For each result of 6+, the unit suffers a mortal wound. This incredibly powerful ability, but mostly against forces that use Horde forces. So 6s to cause a mortal wound is not bad. On a 12-man unit, you know, that'll be probably about 2 mortal wounds. But it's also not bad on a 30-man blob, because you're going to cause 5 mortal wounds. But on a Tesseract Vault, you fundamentally sort of double it, so you get, you know, on 12-man units you're going to cause 4 mortal wounds, and then on a 30-man blob you're probably going to cause about 10 mortal wounds. Being able to pick the unit is useful as well, because some of these you have to pick the closest visible unit, but this allows you to pick, and it's got a good range. Ultimately, I prefer other abilities that affect multiple units, as hordes tend to be cheap, so mortal wounds don't need to really worry about them so much, and there's other weapons that can deal with hordes probably more effectively. You don't really need to put mortal wounds into them. But still, it can have a devastating effect on the morale, because if you do a Tesseract Vault and cause 10 mortal wounds, there's still 20 of them, and then if you then put some more shots on them, you might wipe out the unit just to morale afterwards, unless you're playing orcs, because they're just difficult to morale in general. But yeah, no, really good, but really situational, and I just feel mortal wounds are a bit wasted when it comes to hordes. I'd love to hear people's thoughts on that one. Finally, Transdimensional Thunderbolt. Pick a visible enemy unit within 24 inches of the Catan Shard and roll a d6. You can only pick a character if it has 10 or more wounds and or is the closest enemy model to the Catan Shard. Add 1 to the result of the Catan Shard using this ability as Tesseract Vault. On a 4+, the chosen unit suffers d3 mortal wounds, then roll a d6 for every other enemy unit that is within 3 inches of the chosen enemy. On a 4+, the unit being rolled for suffers a mortal wound. Not my favourite ability. If your opponent has a huge number of close units together, then yeah, sure, generally there might be some use to it. It's long range, may hit multiple units, but only causes single multiple wounds after the initial target. I like Skyfalling Stars over this, however maybe you can have an opponent that stretches the army units out, maybe a screening unit, so it can be useful. But generally I'm going to say it's far too situational. Having your opponent having that many units close by and then you've got to roll for them, and then you're only going to cause single mortal wounds. Nah, I'd rather just choose the priority targets and cause some damage there. So yeah, not my favourite one. If I'm going to say my favourite abilities out of these are going to be Skyfalling Stars and Cosmic Fire are really reliable. Skyfalling Stars gives you sort of a medium to kind of long range, it's 18 inches, but you know, those units you target are, if they're small units, are going to suffer a bit of damage. Seismic Assault, if you are going to go against, horde armies, maybe. Antimatter Meteor is if you're not too sure, that's a good second. Cosmic Fire, I think, is absolutely great if you are being quite aggressive with Catan. Try and get loads of units around you and explode, and you're going to do quite well. That's the one I like the best. I just roll really poorly for it. Next we're going to go on to Dynastic codes, and now this is the fun part. I can't stress how much I love Legion traits, Dynastic codes, Forge Worlds, etc. Such a fantastic, in my way, best addition to the rules, you know, for 8th edition. You know, in a while it's the best thing they have added. They add a lot of personality to armies, how they work, removing a lot of similarities to how people used to play, generally same old lists, but they can change now a lot depending on how you do play Legion rules, Dynastic codes, etc. Sure, competitive players will probably keep, you know, playing the best rules, etc., and that's fine, but it gives a lot more variety to your list, and certainly how me and David play Necrons are really different from each other. So let's have a look at the Dynastic codes that we have options for. So let's go into Sutek. If a ranged unit with this code advances, it treats all ranged weapons it is equipped with as assault weapons until the end of the turn. So if you advance, you can become assault, which is kind of nice. E.g., Rapidfire 1 weapon is treated as an assault 1 weapon, and heavy D6 weapons are treated as assault D6 weapons. In addition, unless it has advanced this turn, a unit of this code does not suffer the penalty to hit from moving and firing heavy weapons. So I say on Sutek, it's meh at best. Shame that so many characters or special characters are part of this Dynasty code. Almost all of them except for those who do not have dynasties at all. Maybe this is, you know, Necrons need a bit more expansion on their special characters to bring more flavour to their dynasties. Yep, there's loads of characters in them, but they're almost all Sutek. The advance and turn rapid fire, or even heavy weapons or other weapons into assault weapons, not one I have favoured in traits. You see them a lot. I think they're in Chaos Space Marines as well. I think they're in AdMech. It's not something I really like because again, I don't like to, you know, advance and fire assault weapons because you are -1 to hit, and when you turn to an assault weapon, you're losing rapid fire as well. There are situations that's going to be really good, but I think you do give up a lot on it as well, and you can't charge as well, which is a pain. So yeah, I don't really like that one. The ignoring move to hit when you're heavy as well is okay. Probably won't benefit infantry models so much because there's not many heavy weapons in infantry units for Necrons. You're going to probably see it more on the vehicles than you will see on infantry. Even destroyers with their heavy weapons ignore the effects of heavy anyway. And they're probably the infantry unit that see the best benefit. But they ignore it anyway. So I'm a little bit not sold when it comes to Sutek. Mithrit, Solar Fury. Each time a model with this code shoots an enemy unit that is within half range of its weapon's maximum range, the armor penetration characteristic of that model's attack is improved by 1. i.e. an armor penetration characteristic of 0 becomes -1, and an armor penetration of characteristic of -1 becomes 2. This is a great Dynasty code, and I think it's one of David's favourites considering his play style. Necrons, especially some of their infantry, thrive at mid-range to short range, and their mid-range to short range becomes even more deadly at -2 AP, and rapid fire is just deadly. David loves to deploy sort of his Necron warriors, Night Scythes, and then he basically flies in, then he beams all his Necron warriors down, and then just rips havoc with a like 220-man Necron warrior blobs, so they're putting out 40 shots each at rapid fire range at -2 AP. It rips through armor like nothing. However, Tesla is probably where you'll see a big benefit from this as well. Tesla getting -1 AP is fantastic. Add on My Will Be Done is truly terrifying. So they essentially become their, you know, their explosion shots. If you've got My Will Be Done, will work on 5s, get them within short range. It's terrifying. You'll see this on Night Scythe Tesla as well, really good because they'll fly in, be close and do it, and they'll be -1 AP, so that's really good as well. Great on Tomb Blades as well, as they can be aggressive with their positioning, really get into, you know, sort of in a position where they can aggressively get within half range, cause damage, and if they do get charged and then survive, they can fly out, maybe reanimate if they've got space, and shoot again and hopefully still be within that -AP. So with Tesla, that can really rock. If you like to be up close and hit hard, maybe not combat, but play aggressively, this is a really good Dynasty code. Next up we have Novuk, Awakened by Murder. You can reroll failed hit rolls in the fight phase for units with this code if they are charged, were charged, or performed a heroic intervention this turn. Now this is my favourite Dynasty code as opposed to David's. Essentially rerolls in the first round of combat unless you're consolidated or piled in 2. Wraiths are devastating and they will hurt you just as much as when they touch you. They'll absolutely rip apart, and 3-up invuln save will make them extremely difficult to move. So I've had great results with Novuk with Wraiths. They are absolutely deadly. Along with Lich Guards, they can be a real pain to move, and Scarabs to a degree. This can be a huge amount of dice that you will get to re-roll. Backed up by some good range support, perhaps Destroyers, Doomsday Ark, who don't really benefit from this at all, but they're still deadly because they've got good ranged. Yeah, I just absolutely love this one. I play a lot of Wraiths, I play a lot of Scarabs, I like a good elite combat force, and the rerolls this just offers is fantastic. Wraiths can also fall back, then recharge in their turn as well, so you could go in, charge, Novuk, rip people apart. Maybe they don't fall back and they do another round of combat. Fine, I'm rocking a 3-up invuln. Next turn I fall back, charge again, and Novuk rerolls again. Really good with Wraiths. I absolutely love it. Next up we have, forgive me if I pronounced wrong, Nilaka. Aggressively territorial. Sorry if I pronounced that so wrong. I'm sure people will tell me how to pronounce it. Reroll hit rolls of 1 for units of this code whenever they shoot, including when firing Overwatch, as long as they did not move in the preceding movement phase and they have not disembarked from a transport during this turn. This is a really tricky one. Necrons are predominantly mid-range to short range when they do shooting, and thus mobility is key either to get into positioning or to get out of a dangerous situation. Though this would be excellent for certain forces, I'm looking at Dark Angels, which I think they have a similar ability to this, where they get to reroll 1s. They have long range plasma, so they can sit still and be very, very deadly. Necrons, this would be a little bit more difficult to pull off. Overall nice, just it takes a wee bit of finesse because their ranged weapons don't benefit as much. Very nice on Doomsday Ark and things, but things that are 24 inches or less, to get the most out of them, a little bit trickier. Next up, another one I'm going to pronounce wrong, Nefrika? Yep. Translocation beams. If a unit with this code advances, add 6 to its move characteristics for that movement phase instead of rolling a dice. If the unit is being affected by my Will Be Done or Wave Command ability, add 7 to its move characteristic instead. In addition, if a unit with this code advances, its models can move across models and terrain as if they were not there. So this is good and all, making you a very aggressively mobile force, moving through the field effortlessly. You don't need to build you do need to build your force around it. However, most assault weapons, which you do want this with, benefit they benefit from Tesla, and that means you're going to lose the biggest benefit of Tesla if you do advance, because you need to be hit on 6s to activate Tesla. It means you're probably going to have to activate buffs. Yeah, you're getting a good bit of mobility, but you lose the big benefit of Tesla unless you spend command points or abilities to make it better. I think in certain games, mobility is absolutely key, especially for Necrons, are not the quickest ones. It's excellent, but really not my play style. If I'm going to be mobile, I'm going to go towards the opponent, I'm going to advance, hope I get a good roll, and then hopefully in turn 2, I'm going to be within range to charge, and then I'm going to rip them to shreds. It may get you there, and I know many people who do rate this ability quite high for aggressive movement, but it's just not my playstyle, and I think it's probably the ability you have to have the most finesse with to pull off well. So yeah, that's my first part of the Necron Codex, looking at obviously their standard rules there, the Dynastic codes and Catan powers. Very interested to see what people think. I'm very interested to hear about Reanimation Protocol, even the Dynastic codes and Catan powers. Catan powers have changed fundamentally, so has Reanimation Protocols, and the Dynastic codes, a lot of them are very, very useful and play into a lot of different people's playstyles. So I'd love to see love to hear how your playstyles do get affected by these abilities. In my part 2, I think I'm covering stratagems, warlord traits, and relics. So yeah, please comment, share, like, and subscribe. Check us out on social media, where you can see our upcoming projects. and check us out on Patreon as well, where you can help support us, bring you more content. So thanks again, and we'll see you on another Tabletop Assault Vassal Report.